Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Michael Goodrow. I'm a fourth year resource economics major here, and today we will be going over the isolated country of New Zealand. The country of New Zealand, located in Oceania, is an island approximately 103,000 square miles with a population of 4.6 million. Today, we will be discussing the historical development of the food and agricultural economy, location, and other factors that have molded the current farming climate, the policy of the region, culture around farming, and the scene of a sheep flock in the Otago region you see here being painted while I narrate this discussion. The island country of New Zealand was colonized in the early 19th century, starting in the northernmost tip of the country. The native population, the Maori, and the European settlers held tense relationships that resulted in numerous conflicts between the two parties, all the way through the mid-19th century to the 20th century. This is according to the official account of history from the New Zealand government's records. The two biggest industries in the early days of European settlement included gold mining and wool production. Sheep production and farming has been deeply rooted in the culture of New Zealand farmers since the early days of colonization, as exhibited by my painting is a scene of this. New Zealand is located within the temperate zone of the southern hemisphere, allowing for a maritime climate to exist. This means that the climate and weather of New Zealand do not have extreme variations in temperature or weather. With this weather, this has allowed for the development of pastoral farming and horticulture of certain rock fruit species. The weather does not allow for major development of broadacre crops like corn or wheat. This means that New Zealand farmers have a limited selection of agriculture to choose from when producing a product. The products that farmers choose from are livestock such as sheep and cattle, along with rock fruits and a growing kiwi fruit industry. The island of New Zealand contains little resources for farming in terms of the necessary feed and fertilizer to supplement the growth of crops and livestock. The island must import most of their input supplies to supplement their farming production. The isolated location in New Zealand has also shaped the way farming is operated due to the long distances to export and import supplies and products. After the conclusion of World War II, New Zealand's economic policy that encompassed all the industries in the country switched to a more isolationist policy. This means that the country is focusing on developing their domestic economy and barring most trade. This caused a unique occurrence in the agricultural industry in New Zealand. The government were paying their farmers to produce less food so that the excess amount of food would not be wasted and or be able to be traded out of the country. Instead, it would be retained within the domestic economy and be consumed by the citizens of New Zealand. The subsidies were also put into place to alleviate the high world prices that existed, such as oil prices and input supply prices, since New Zealand must import most goods because of the lack of natural resources. With the subsidy reforms present in the 1900s, farmers elected to farm less and less production because the incentive would be to limit their production to gain government-sponsored subsidies that would be their income. However, once the greater economic reform of the 1980s came around, the culture in farming had to change, with some farmers unable to cope with the change, and they had to close or sell their farms to other farmers who were set on making a profit and moving forward. These farmers expanded their production with the new unsubsidized era of farming in New Zealand. Since the economic reform occurred, New Zealand farmers have begun to band together to form cooperatives to strengthen the amount of output that the farmers could not grow by themselves. Examples of a cooperative are seen in the Fonterra Cooperative, which is the largest dairy cooperative in New Zealand. This cooperative can act on an international scale, funding the local farmers in New Zealand to grow and cultivate the dairy cattle and in turn the Fonterra Cooperative markets the food to international markets. This culture is seen in New Zealand due to the small farming population that seek to band together to form a competitive advantage against the major producers of the world. My project is a scene of a sheep flock, which in New Zealand is more likely to be owned by the First Light Cooperative that focuses on livestock and cattle. Moving on to my project. The painting you have been observing this whole time in my video is a scene representing Lake Hawea, located in the Otago region of New Zealand, which are poor for cultivating crops, but due to the temperate climate and ample pastures, contain the perfect conditions for raising livestock for consumption and dairy production. I was inspired to paint this painting because of the breathtaking scenes you have seen in Lord of the Rings, which was filmed primarily in New Zealand. The rolling landscapes and varied topography ensure a breathtaking view. The scene you see here is an idyllic day in New Zealand with cloudy skies and a sun shining through on the mountains. The mountains are overlooking a crystal clear lake formed by the glacier thousands of years ago. The sheep grazing are painted in to represent the thriving sheep production of the country. With New Zealand, they export more than 93% of their production of sheep, and that constitutes over 4% of the total sheep world population. The amount of sheep exported also constitutes 40% of the world's sheep exports, making New Zealand a major player in sheep export products. New Zealand exports 91% of their wool production and 92% of lamb production. These figures come from the Nick Lease lecture on agribusiness in New Zealand. The flock of sheep are representative of a collective unit like the farmers that have formed cooperatives to help one another reach a greater competitive advantage with the world and create a thriving dairy industry, cattle industry, and agricultural industry on this isolated small country. The country of New Zealand is home to one of the world's largest livestock production in an isolated country located in Oceania. The country is home to a small population that participates in an iceberg economy, meaning that the population exports more goods than they can consume themselves. This country is filled with idyllic scenery as shown in my painting above and home to a unique agricultural system with cooperatives to make up for the lack of farming workers in the economy. This project's goal has been to highlight the agriculture in New Zealand and show a scene from the day in the life of a sheep flock that I titled A Scene of Pasture. Thank you for viewing my presentation and have a wonderful day.